Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Spencer and welcome to another HLIFX demo video where in this case we're going to be looking at the HLIFX 002 board again, and for this video we have it set up to use our planes circuit or our planes control system. Uh, this one is specifically designed for controlling the blinkers or the flashers on certain types of jet aircraft, jetliners such as Airbus and Boeing, along with a couple of optional military modes if you want to go down that particular route. So just a quick overview of the board. This is the underside of it. Hopefully, as you can see here, we have our 5 control pins labeled A through E. The board does use all 5 of these pins, potentially use all 5 of these pins. We also have our voltage and ground pin. That, of course, is for power. And we also have a 5-volt breakout. For the planes board, the 5-volt pin is not used. You simply leave it disconnected. VN and ground, as I said, is for your power. VN for your positive, ground for your negative, the ground of your circuit as well. The board is designed to work at both 9-volt and 12-volt power, DC. You can use one or the other. That's pretty much just a basic overview of the solder points, control points, and the pins on the board. On the other side, on the top side, are all the components. We print all the labeling on the underside because that helps to save space on the board. Plus, I personally recommend that you put your wires in from the top down through to the underside and solder them here. It's just a little bit easier for the thermal performance of the board, and it also helps minimize the risk of you accidentally damaging a component with the tip of your soldering iron and whatnot. The board itself is about 1 inch by 3/4 of an inch in size. We do try to keep the vertical height of the board as small as possible because we understand space is a premium, particularly if you're putting this inside a model kit. We personally recommend you put your boards inside of your bases, but we do know that some folks like to put their circuit boards in their models. But we suggest bases because if something goes wrong in the board, you need to have access to it. You don't have to literally break your model back open, but we do understand that's a personal choice. But that's a basic look at the 002 board. What I'll do now is set up the demo circuit, show you the effects and how it works, and I'll be back in a second. And here I have the planes demo here set up on the breadboard. This is the breadboard that I actually use for a lot of my prototyping and design work for the HLIFX boards. What I've done is I've taken the 002 board here and just jumpered it right over to the breadboard itself. And for each of the lighting and control channels, I've just put singular stand-in representative LEDs to make it relatively simple and not too complex, just to help give you a better idea of the actual effects that you're going to be getting if you buy one of these boards. Pay no attention to any of this. This is just other demo circuitry. But what we have are 3 actual lighting channels, A, B, and C. And we also have our 2 control channels, D and E, which I'll talk about here very shortly. These control which particular airplane mode you're in, whether it be Airbus, Boeing, or one of the 2 military modes. So let me go ahead and apply power to the board. This is straight 9-volt power from my wall wart. When I turn power onto the board, you see that it immediately begins to run. I have turned off my overhead magnifier lamp just so that it doesn't wash out everything on the breadboard here. And what we have are our flasher effects. In this case, the board by default is in Airbus mode. So what we have are channel A, which are the wing flashers, and for Airbus, that's a fast double flash. Pretty sure the camera can pick this up. Every now and then, the frame rate may make it look like a single flash, but trust me, that's a fast double flash there. Channel B are the tail flashers. For Airbus, this is a single flash that is synced with your wing flashers. And then finally, you have the beacon, or the lights that are on the fuselage of the plane. That's also a single flash, and it alternates from the wing and tail flashers. But that's the Airbus mode circuit. That's really the only flashers that are on the plane. You can drive multiple LEDs on these three channels, so you can get as many flashers on the plane as you need them. The instructions will obviously go into detail on how you wire up those LEDs. But those are the basic effects for Airbus mode. That's mode 1 of 4. So how do you get the other modes? You do that with pins D and E, and you do that via jumpers. If you leave pin D and E alone, disconnected, do nothing to it, then you will be in the default Airbus mode, what we're calling mode 1. If you jumper pin D or pin E to ground, that is, you connect a wire from point D to ground or point E to ground, or some combination thereof, you'll switch into different modes. So it's literally taking a piece of wire, soldering it to point D, and then taking the other end and connecting it to the ground of your circuit. Ideally, the shorter the length to ground, the better, but as long as you have a decent ground wire going from point D to ground, just jumpered right like that, then you'll be in good shape. Now on the breadboard, I have this done via these toggle switches. Right now with the switches open, pin D is connected to nothing, and with this switch open, pin E is connected to nothing. If I were to close these switches, then pin D would jumper to ground, and if I close this switch, pin E would jumper to ground. And you can technically do this yourself. If you want to be able to switch between modes, you can use an inline toggle switch. You're just breaking or connecting that jumpered path to ground. Understand that if you do that, you will have to repower the board for it to take effect. But enough talking about it, let me actually show you this process in action. So I'm going to turn power off to the board, and I'm going to jumper pin D to ground. So pin D is now connected to ground, pin E is left alone. That takes us into mode 1, that's Boeing. If I turn power back on, we're now in Boeing mode. In this mode, the wings and the tail flasher are still synced, but you no longer have the double flasher. That's an Airbus mode thing. For Boeing, it's a single flash. We still have our alternating beacon, and that's Boeing, that's mode 1. So by jumpering pin D to ground, we switch over to Boeing. If I were to turn power off and unjumper that, we'd go right back to Airbus with the double flash. Okay? So both D and E left alone, we're in Airbus, mode 1. If we jumper pin D to ground, we go into mode 2, which is Boeing. And like I said, I can make changes, but it doesn't register until I actually turn the board on or off, then on again. The board has to basically reset if you make any changes to the jumpers. That's just the way we've coded it. That's just the way it works because for a number of different reasons, most of them in terms of optimization of memory and speed and various other things. If we leave pin D alone, but jumper pin E to ground, then we are in military mode number 1. If I turn power back on, this is what we get. We get, again, a synced wing and tail flasher, and now we have what effectively is a triple blink. Now the camera's not really picking it up, but the first two flashes are ever so slightly shorter than the third. Um, our resident expert on this, Tom, provided us with the timings for a few different military modes that he was able to dredge up some information online for. And believe it or not, military blinking can be kind of space age these days. So, we had to make some choices as to what modes we should go with. Um, and we decided on this one because it's a triple blink. Looks a little bit different than most of the others. So what we have again is a single wing and tail flash that are synced. This is synced in that it starts blinking the same time as these, but it's a triple blink. It's actually two blinks with an ever so slightly longer third blink. And that's military mode number 1, or in this case, mode 3. And finally, to go to mode 4, you jumper both D and E to ground. That's your fourth mode, and that's military mode number 2. This one's a little bit more interesting, which is why we went with it. It looks visually distinct from most of the others. Again, we have our wing and tail lights single flash. Here we have a slower double blink that actually takes 2 flashing periods of these to complete a single period here. See how this flashes, then this does 2 flashes, and then this has to go through a whole other flash yet again before this repeats. So when you first see it for the very first time, it looks a little strange, but after a while you kind of get used to understanding how that works. But it's a visual enough distinction to where we thought that would make a good fourth mode. And so there you go. I'll just really quickly take you through all 4 modes again. Pin D and E left disconnected. Then we have Airbus. Jumper pin D to ground. We have Boeing. Jumper pin E to ground. We have military mode 1. Jumper both to ground. We have military mode number 2. And that is the FX002 planes board. Of course, this doesn't necessarily have to be used on just an airplane. Any kind of ship, whether it be an aircraft, a spacecraft, real space, anything you want a couple of blinkers or a few different blinking effects on, this is not a bad choice either. But we did, particularly for Airbus and Boeing, try to get the timings as close as we could. And again, Tom provided us with a few timings for the military modes that we've also included for modes 3 and 4, military modes, number 1 and 2. So, like I said, it's just a matter of leaving pins D and E alone or jumpering them to ground. Again, you could, if you wanted, use toggle switches or latching push button switches if you actually wanted to be able to select the different modes. Again, just understand that if you do that, you have to turn off the board and repower it for the changes to take effect. But that is a basic look at the planes board. Take us back into Airbus. It's a nice little board, 4 different modes for what it is. Pretty good. We're quite happy with it. So if you like the board or you think you could use it in a future build of a jetliner or some kind of military aircraft where you might need a couple of blinkers here and there, then consider stopping over at the HobbyLink International online shop at shop.hobbylinkinternational.com. Hopefully this demo video will be up on the product page at the time of release, so you can watch this video again over there. There should also be a link to a downloadable set of instructions, PDF instructions, so you can actually read them and look through them and decide whether or not it's a board that you're interested in getting. And if you are, then buy it. So with that being said, until the next video, I want to thank you all for watching. And as always, stay safe, take care, and happy modeling.